Christmas Day. Everyone's gathered in my parents' living room, laughing, sipping wine, unwrapping presents. My siblings, their spouses, their kids, all dressed up in cashmere and tweed. I stand in the corner by the wilting poinsettia, completely ignored. No gifts with my name on them under the tree. No seat saved for me at the sprawling dining table, already set for dinner. They act like I don't even exist, a ghost haunting the edges of their perfect festive photograph. The new 85-inch flat-screen TV is on in the background, a silent sentinel playing some glossy business documentary. My father had spent the morning boasting about its pixel density, its refresh rate, its ability to make you feel like you were right there in the room. Suddenly, the laughter stops. It doesn't fade, it cuts off, like a switch has been flipped. My little nephew, Leo, who is usually glued to his own tablet, points a sticky finger at the massive screen. "Hey," he shouts, his voice piping sharp and clear into the sudden brittle silence. "That's Aunt Emlyn on TV." Every head swivels, first to the screen, then to me, then back to the screen. My face, professionally lit and serious, fills the entire 85 inches. Beneath my image, a simple, brutal caption appears. Forbes magazine's 30 under 30, self-made women in tech. Their mouths hang open. My sister Blythe's perfectly manicured hand, holding a flute of champagne, freezes halfway to her lips. My brother Anson just stares, his expression utterly blank, as if his brain cannot process the data it's receiving. My mother, the matriarch, goes rigid, her smile from a moment ago still plastered on her face but now a grotesque frozen mask, and my father's wineglass, a heavy crystal tumbler, tips from his suddenly nerveless fingers, spilling a dark red stain onto the cream-colored carpet. A stain that I know will never truly come out. And I just smile. A small, quiet smile I've been practicing for 5 years. They called me poor, a failure, a burden, until the world called me a genius. 5 years earlier, that same living room felt like a different world. It was a courtroom, and I was the one on trial. I had saved for 2 months to afford the train ticket home for Christmas, a grueling 6-hour journey that felt like a pilgrimage to a place I no longer belonged. I lived in a shoebox studio apartment in a city 3 states away, a place where the landlord ignored my calls about the persistent leak in the ceiling, and the radiator clanked like a dying machine. I was juggling 2, sometimes 3, part-time jobs, none of which had anything to do with my college degree. I was 24 and already felt like a failure. My siblings, however, were paragons of success. Anson, the eldest, was a corporate lawyer with a corner office and a perpetually smug expression. Blythe had married Miles, a man whose family money dripped from him like cologne, and she had turned being wealthy into a full-time profession. Corbin, the youngest, was the golden boy, a consultant whose primary business seemed to be spending our father's money on frivolous ventures that always seemed to almost take off. They arrived in new cars, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly rent, their children clutching the latest electronics. The first cut came at dinner. The main table was a grand affair, decked out with my mother's best china and silver. There were place cards for everyone: Anson and his wife, Blythe and Miles, Corbin and his flavor-of-the-month girlfriend, my parents at either end, and then there was me. My mother, with an apologetic little flutter of her hands, gestured toward a small, rickety card table in the corner, where my 2 youngest nephews were already seated, scribbling on placemats with crayons. "Emlyn, dear, we just couldn't quite squeeze another chair in at the main table. You don't mind, do you? You're so good with the kids." I did mind. I minded so much it felt like a physical ache in my chest. But I smiled, a tight, brittle thing, and sat down on a chair that was a little too small for me. The surface of the card table was sticky with what I hoped was juice. From my seat I had a perfect view of my family laughing and clinking glasses, their conversation a warm, exclusionary hum. I felt like I was watching them through a pane of glass. Then, Blythe's voice, intentionally loud and carrying across the room, sliced through the noise. "Oh, look at Emlyn over there. Relegated to the kids' table. I suppose it's good practice for her future. She must be too busy failing to find a real job to have time for adult conversation." The laughter was scattered, uncomfortable, but it was there. I looked to my mother, my father, pleading with my eyes for one of them to say something, to defend me. They didn't. My mother busied herself cutting her roast beef into impossibly small pieces. My father took a long, slow sip of his wine, his gaze fixed on a point just over my head. The silence from them was worse than the laughter. It was confirmation. They agreed. Miles, my brother-in-law, leaned back in his chair, a conspiratorial smirk on his face. He lowered his voice, but not so low that I couldn't hear him. "Just marry rich like Blythe did," he whispered, a cloud of expensive scotch rolling over me. "It's your only chance, kiddo. Some of us are earners, and some of us are, well, you know." I wanted to disappear, to shrink into nothing and vanish from that room. But the final, breaking moment was yet to come. After dinner, we gathered in the living room for presents. My father, playing Santa, handed out beautifully wrapped boxes. Anson got a watch, Corbin, a drone. Blythe and my mother received matching cashmere scarves. Then came the grand finale. My mother stood up, beaming, holding a stack of large flat boxes from a high-end designer. "I found these wonderful jackets, and I thought it would be so lovely if we all had one. A little family uniform." She handed one to Anson, one to Corbin, one to Blythe, one to Miles, one to Anson's wife. She even had one for herself and my father. They all unwrapped them, revealing sleek, black, ridiculously expensive-looking coats. They held them up, admiring them, a united front of familial success. I waited for my box. It never came. I must have looked confused, because my mother finally turned to me, her expression a mix of pity and impatience. "Oh, Emlyn, I'm sorry. They were just so terribly expensive, you see. I had to pre-order them and, well, it was too expensive to get one more." Her words hung in the air, each one a perfectly polished stone thrown directly at me. It wasn't about the money. Corbin had been given a new car for his birthday. It was a message. "You are not one of us. You are not worth the investment." The jacket wasn't just a piece of clothing, it was a symbol of my exclusion. The final undeniable proof that in their eyes I was a liability, a rounding error in the family budget. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went numb. I mumbled something about catching an early train, a lie so thin it was transparent, but no one questioned it. No one tried to stop me. My father gave me a perfunctory hug. My mother patted my arm. "Do take care, dear." On the cold, rattling train ride back to my leaky apartment, the city lights blurring past the frosted window, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, hard resolve crystallizing in my gut. They had made their choice. They had decided who I was, and as the train plunged into the darkness of a tunnel, I made a silent vow, a promise whispered only to myself. They won't notice me now, but one day they'll have to see me. The months that followed that Christmas were a descent into a specific kind of quiet desperation. My life was a collage of small, persistent miseries. The studio apartment, which I'd once seen as a symbol of my independence, now felt like a prison cell. The leak in the ceiling, a slow, rhythmic drip, drip, drip into a saucepan I kept on the floor, became the soundtrack to my life. The radiator either blasted suffocating heat or went silent, leaving me to shiver under a pile of thin blankets. My laptop, a relic from my college days, was my only link to the outside world, and it was dying. The screen would flicker, the fan would whir like a tiny distressed engine, and it would crash at the most inopportune times, taking hours of work with it. My diet consisted of peanut butter toast for breakfast, peanut butter toast for lunch, and for a special treat, dollar ramen for dinner, jazzed up with a squirt of hot sauce if I was feeling extravagant. I lost weight. I couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes. My resume, which I meticulously tailored for every application, was a black hole. I would send it out into the void and hear nothing back, not even a form rejection. It was as if I didn't exist in the professional world either. To keep the lights on and the leaky roof over my head, I worked 2 soul-crushing part-time jobs. From 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, I was a dog walker. I trudged through the city streets in rain, snow, and suffocating humidity, untangling leashes and picking up after dogs who lived in apartments far nicer than my own. From 3 until 9 at night, I did data entry for a dreary accounting firm, my mind going numb as I transferred endless columns of numbers from one spreadsheet to another. My coworkers in both jobs were not unkind, but we were all just treading water, too exhausted to dream. When I once made the mistake of mentioning, during a bleak lunch break, that I wanted to own my own company one day, one of the other data entry clerks, a woman named Sharon, had laughed. Not a mean laugh, just a tired, hollow one. "Oh, honey," she'd said, "we all wanted that once. Just focus on making rent." But every night, after I got home, my feet aching and my eyes burning from staring at the screen, I would open my dying laptop. I wouldn't watch movies or scroll through social media, which was a curated feed of other people's happiness that I couldn't bear to see. Instead, I consumed tech startup videos like they were air. I watched interviews with founders, TED Talks on innovation, and programming tutorials on YouTube. I filled a cheap spiral notebook with diagrams, flowcharts, and app ideas. It was my secret world, the one place where I wasn't Emlyn the failure, but Emlyn the architect. The idea that began to consume me was simple: a platform that connected small businesses, the ones that couldn't afford massive agency fees, with talented freelance coders and designers from all over the world. It was a problem I understood intimately, from both sides. The chasm between my reality and my family's continued to widen. I avoided their calls, which were infrequent anyway. When I did speak to my mother, the conversations were brief and strained. She would ask if I had a real job yet, and I would give a vague, non-committal answer. One day, during one of these stilted calls, she let something slip, a piece of news delivered with casual pride. "Oh, you'll never guess. Your father just bought Corbin a second house, down by the lake. Just a little something, as a Christmas investment." An investment. Corbin, who had never worked a real day in his life, was given a house, a whole house. I was fighting to pay rent on a room where I could hear my neighbors breathing through the paper-thin walls. The injustice of it was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I hung up the phone, a quiet rage simmering inside me. My own breaking point came a few weeks later. It was the dead of winter, a brutal cold snap that had frozen the city solid. I had miscalculated. A medical bill for a minor infection had wiped out my savings, and I was 3 days late on rent. My paycheck from the dog walking job was late. My rent check bounced. I came home from my data entry shift, exhausted and frozen, to find a notice on my door and a new lock. I was locked out. I had nowhere to go. My pride wouldn't let me call my family and beg. My few friends in the city were also struggling, living with multiple roommates in cramped apartments. I couldn't impose, so I did the only thing I could. I found a 24-hour laundromat a few blocks away. I spent the night huddled in the alley behind it, tucked behind a row of humming dryers for warmth. The scent of bleach and fabric softener thick in the air. The snow began to fall, soft, silent flakes that landed on my thin coat and melted. I watched them, shivering, tears freezing on my cheeks. This was it. This was bottom. And as I curled into a tight ball, trying to preserve what little body heat I had left, I whispered it into the frozen air, a promise to the indifferent night. They think I'm a joke, but I'll build something they can never take from me. The morning after I slept behind the laundromat was a blur of gray slush and shame. I used the last of my cash to buy a coffee and sit in a warm cafe for a few hours, just to feel human again. The coffee shop was my unofficial office. It had reliable Wi-Fi, which I used without buying more than a single small coffee, and a corner booth that was usually empty. It was there, a few days later, that my life took a turn I could never have anticipated. It was raining, a miserable, persistent downpour that turned the city streets into a murky reflection of the sky. I was hunched over my dying laptop, lost in my own world. On the screen was a crude wireframe I had designed for my app, the digital marketplace I was now calling Gigside. I was sketching out the user interface, trying to make it clean and intuitive, my brow furrowed in concentration. I was so focused that I didn't notice the man who had taken the table next to mine until he spoke. That's an interesting user flow. Are you mapping out a two-sided marketplace? His voice was calm and deep, without a trace of condescension. I looked up, startled. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with kind eyes crinkled at the corners, a well-tailored but unassuming tweed jacket, and a head of silver hair. He gestured with his cup towards my screen. I immediately felt a flush of embarrassment, my instinct to hide my pathetic amateurish project. "Oh, it's nothing," I mumbled, moving to close the laptop. "Just a silly idea." "I don't think it's silly at all," he said, his gaze sharp and intelligent. "You're trying to solve the problem of liquidity. How do you ensure there are enough quality providers for the clients, and enough clients for the providers, right from the start? That's the classic chicken and egg problem for any platform like this." I stared at him. He hadn't just glanced at my screen. He'd understood the core challenge of my idea in seconds. My defensiveness melted away, replaced by a spark of curiosity. "How did you—" He smiled, a genuine warm smile. "I spent 30 years of my life building something similar, just with a different commodity. My name is Darius Renwick." The name didn't mean anything to me at first. He must have seen the blank look on my face. I was the CTO of a company called TechLease. We sold it about 5 years ago. Now I mostly just drink coffee and bother young people who look like they're trying to build the future. I did know TechLease. It was a massive enterprise software firm. They were legendary. This man, this quiet man in a tweed jacket, wasn't just some retired hobbyist. He was a giant in the industry. My heart started to pound, a frantic, hopeful rhythm against my ribs. For the next hour, he didn't lecture me. He questioned me. He grilled me. "Who's your target user? Not just small businesses. Be specific. What's your monetization strategy? Subscriptions? Commission? A freemium model? How will you verify the quality of your freelance coders? What's the arbitration process if a project goes wrong?" He poked holes in my idea, not to sink it, but to force me to build a better boat. With every question, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had thought about these things. I had answers, maybe not perfect ones, but considered ones. I talked about tiered subscription models, a rating and review system, and a milestone-based payment escrow to protect both parties. I pulled out my notebook, the one filled with my frantic scribbles, and showed him my research. He listened intently, nodding slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. For the first time, someone was taking me seriously. Someone was looking at my dream not as a pathetic fantasy, but as a viable business plan. When I finally ran out of steam, my voice hoarse, he leaned back in his chair and took a long sip of his coffee. The silence stretched out, and my anxiety began to creep back in. Maybe he thought it was all garbage after all. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "You've got the eye," he said. "You see the problem, and you have a clear vision for the solution. That's rare. Most people just have a solution looking for a problem." He paused, and his expression grew serious. "But an idea is worthless. Execution is everything. And let me be clear, no one is going to hand it to you. You'll have to build it. Brick by painful brick. You'll have to fight for every user, every dollar, every line of code. Are you ready for that?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of my freezing night in the alley, the condescending laughter of my family, the endless rejection emails. Was I ready? I had never been more ready for anything in my life. "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it felt like the loudest word I had ever spoken. He nodded, as if I had just passed a critical test. "Good. Because I don't invest in pity, I invest in potential. If I help you, if I offer you my mentorship, I expect you to rise. I will open doors for you, but you have to walk through them. I will give you advice, but you have to do the work. This will be the hardest thing you have ever done." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Hope was a terrifying, brilliant, blinding thing. This man, this stranger in a coffee shop, was offering me a lifeline, not a handout, but a chance to build. "I'm ready," I said again. this time with more force. I'll do whatever it takes. Darius Renwick smiled, a true brilliant smile that lit up his entire face. All right then, Emlyn, let's get you another coffee. And then you and I are going to start building an empire. The period that followed my meeting with Darius was a blur of caffeine, code, and unrelenting effort. He wasn't a gentle teacher. His mentorship was a trial by fire. He didn't give me answers, he gave me resources and pointed me in the direction of the fire hose of information I needed to drink from. I'm not going to teach you how to code, he said during our second meeting, but I will send you a list of the best online courses and forums. You will learn it yourself. The struggle is part of the process. It forces you to understand the machine from the inside out. And so, my life found a new, grueling rhythm. I kept my dog walking job because it was flexible and paid in cash, but I quit the soul-crushing data entry position. Every spare dollar I earned went not to food or comfort, but to digital tools. I paid for a premium subscription to a coding academy. I bought a domain name gigside.com and paid for the cheapest server hosting I could find. My tiny apartment transformed into a command center. Sticky notes with lines of code and UI/UX principles covered the walls. The drip from the ceiling was just background noise now. I learned to code. It was like learning a new language, one that was both infuriatingly literal and elegantly logical. I spent entire nights wrestling with a single misplaced semicolon that would bring the whole system crashing down. I learned about databases, about server-side logic, about front-end frameworks. My notebook filled with terms like API, authentication, and responsive design. There were moments of sheer, soul-crushing frustration where I would slam my laptop shut, convinced I was too stupid, too far behind to ever make it work. I'd pace my tiny room, the ghost of my sister's laughter echoing in my ears, telling me I was failing again. But then I would see the sticky note Darius had made me write, and put on my monitor. Fail, learn, fix, repeat, and I would open the laptop again, take a deep breath, and dive back in. To make ends meet, I started taking on tiny freelance gigs myself, using the very skills I was trying to build a platform for. I'd find small businesses on Craigslist that needed a simple one-page website or a logo designed. The pay was terrible, but it was a triple win. It brought in a little money, it forced me to practice my new skills under pressure, and it gave me first-hand insight into the struggles of my future customers. I was my own first user. After 3 months of relentless work, I had it, the first, barely functional version of Gigside. It was ugly, it was clunky, it was held together with the digital equivalent of duct tape and prayers. But it worked. A user could sign up, post a project, and another user could bid on it. It was real. I launched it. I pressed the button to make the site live, and nothing happened. Crickets. I had built the boat, but it was sitting in a dry dock with no ocean in sight. Darius had warned me this would happen. Building the product is the first 1% of the work, he'd said. Now the real fight begins. He gave me my next assignment. Get one. Just one paying customer. So began the second phase of my struggle. Sales. I was not a natural salesperson. The idea of cold calling or emailing strangers filled me with dread. But the alternative, quitting, was unthinkable. So I compiled a list. I scoured local business directories, online forums, and social media groups, looking for any small business owner who had ever expressed a need for tech help. I drafted an email, rewriting it 100 times to sound professional and not desperate. The first 50 emails I sent were met with absolute silence. The next 20 got a few curt no thank yous. A few were flagged as spam. The rejection was a familiar sting, but this time it felt different. It wasn't personal, it was a business problem to be solved. I tweaked my subject lines. I personalized the opening paragraphs. I researched each company and mentioned a specific problem I thought my platform could help them solve. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, a reply landed in my inbox. It was from a woman named Maria, who ran a small artisanal bakery. Her website was a decade old, and she wanted to add an online ordering system, but had been quoted thousands of dollars by local agencies. She was skeptical, but my email had intrigued her. She wrote, I don't have much of a budget, but I'm willing to give your platform a try. What's the catch? I almost cried with relief. I wrote back immediately, offering to personally walk her through the entire process. There was no catch. My platform was new, and I just needed someone to believe in it. We spoke on the phone, and I guided her through posting her project. Create a simple, secure e-commerce page for Maria's pastries. Within hours, a bid came in. It was from a young freelance developer in Romania whom I had personally recruited through a coding forum. He offered to do the job for a fraction of what the agencies had quoted. Maria, cautiously optimistic, accepted. I watched the transaction like a nervous parent. I set up the payment escrow system myself, manually holding the funds. I checked in with both Maria and the developer daily. 2 weeks later, Maria's new online ordering system was live. The first day, she received 6 orders. By the end of the week, she'd had over 50. She sent me an ecstatic email filled with exclamation points. "This is a game changer for me, Emlyn. I'm telling everyone I know about this." And she did. She told the woman who ran the flower shop next door. She told her cousin who had a small accounting practice. Word began to spread through this small, tight-knit community of entrepreneurs. My first yes led to a second, then a fifth, then a 10th. Every single dollar of commission that Gigsy'd earned, I reinvested. I upgraded my server. I paid for a small digital ad campaign. I bought a better code editor. I was still living on peanut butter, but my company was starting to eat. The invisible daughter was finally building something visible. The small trickle of success from Maria and the other early adopters turned into a steady stream, but with growth came a new, formidable enemy: burnout. My life had shrunk to the 4 walls of my apartment and the glow of my laptop screen. I was working 16, sometimes 18-hour days. I was the CEO, the lead developer, the entire marketing department, the head of customer service, and the janitor. I would wake up, code, answer support emails, walk dogs to make rent money, code some more, and then collapse into bed, my mind still racing with bug reports and feature requests. My health started to suffer. I had a constant low-grade headache. My diet was still atrocious. I hadn't seen a friend in months. The isolation was a heavy blanket. There were days I felt like a ghost, haunting my own life, my only interactions happening through a screen. The temptation to just stop, to get a normal 9-to-5 job and have a normal life was immense. I would scroll through old photos on my phone, pictures of friends laughing at a bar, of my family on vacation, and a profound loneliness would wash over me. Was this worth it? Darius was my anchor. We met for coffee once a week, and I would unload all my frustrations and fears. He would listen patiently, then push back. No one said building an empire was glamorous, he'd remind me. This is the forge. This is where the steel is tempered. You're tired. Good. It means you're working. You're lonely. Good. It means you're focused. Don't let the short-term pain make you forget the long-term vision. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place, a niche tech blog, one that I read religiously but never dreamed of being mentioned in. Ran a story titled, "The 10 Scrappiest Startups You've Never Heard of." And there, at number 7, was Gigside. The writer praised its simple, effective model and its focus on empowering true small businesses, not just other tech startups. He called it a quiet revolution for the little guy. The effect was instantaneous. The article was shared on Twitter, then picked up by larger tech aggregators. Overnight, my website traffic exploded. Sign-ups surged, not just from my city, but from all over the country, then from Canada, the UK, and Australia. The server I had so carefully upgraded was suddenly struggling to keep up. My inbox was a waterfall of new users, project posts, and support tickets. It was terrifying and exhilarating. With the new attention came a different kind of interest. An email landed in my inbox with the subject line, "Investment Opportunity." It was from a small venture capital firm. They had seen the blog post and were extremely impressed with my traction. They wanted to meet. My first instinct was elation. This was it. This was the validation I had been craving. Real investors wanted to give me money. I called Darius, my voice buzzing with excitement. He listened to me, then said calmly, Take the meeting, hear them out. But Emlyn, be very, very careful. The moment you take someone else's money, the clock starts ticking. And it's not your clock anymore, it's theirs. I went to the meeting. It was in a sleek, glass-walled office that smelled of money and ambition. The investor, a man named Julian with slicked back hair and a watch that cost more than my entire life's earnings, was charming and persuasive. He talked about synergy and scaling and market disruption. Then he made his offer. He would invest $200,000 in Gigside, a number so large I could barely comprehend it. $200,000. It was enough to quit dog walking forever, enough to hire a team, enough to fix the leak in my ceiling, or better yet, move out of my miserable apartment. It was a lifeline, a golden ticket. Then came the catch. For his $200,000, he wanted 60% of my company. 60%. I would instantly lose control. I would become an employee in the company I had built from nothing, with my own sweat and tears. Julian framed it as a partnership. We provide the capital and the network. You provide the vision. Together we'll be unstoppable. He made it sound so reasonable, so logical. $200,000. I could taste it. I could feel the texture of a life without the constant grinding anxiety about rent. I told him I needed to think about it. Don't think too long, he'd said with a shark-like smile. Opportunities like this don't wait. I walked out of that office in a daze. My mind was a battlefield. One side screamed at me to take the deal. It was a way out. It was security. It was more money than I had ever seen. The other side, a quieter voice that sounded a lot like Darius, whispered a warning. You'll always be an employee in your own company. I went to the grocery store, my mind reeling. I was on autopilot, wandering the aisles. I could buy steak. I could buy fresh vegetables, organic milk, cheese that didn't come in individually wrapped plastic slices. With that money, I could buy the whole store. But my feet, out of habit, led me to the aisle with the bread and peanut butter. As I stood there holding a jar of Jif, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. My brother Corbin had just posted a new photo. I clicked on it. There he was, tanned and grinning, standing at the helm of a gleaming white yacht. The caption read, "Decided to pick up a little something for my Instagram content. Yacht life, boss moves, earned not given." Earned not given. The hypocrisy was so blatant, so staggering, it knocked the wind out of me. He had never earned anything in his life. He had been given everything. Houses, cars, and now a yacht, all funded by my father, all treated as disposable content for a shallow online persona. And here I was, agonizing over a deal that would save me from poverty, but cost me my soul, my creation, the one thing I had ever truly built myself. The choice became instantly blindingly clear. I put the peanut butter in my basket, along with a loaf of cheap bread. I went home to my leaky apartment, sat down at my rickety desk, and sent a polite, firm email to Julian. Thank you for the generous offer, but I have decided to decline. I will be retaining full ownership of Gigside. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by a powerful, unshakable sense of resolve. That night, I ate a peanut butter sandwich for dinner. It was the most satisfying meal I had ever had. And then, feeling a new surge of energy, I opened my laptop and started coding a massive, ambitious update for my platform. If I was going to do this on my own terms, I was going to do it right. I was going to build something so big and so powerful that I would never need someone like Julian again. The months that followed my rejection of the investment offer were a strange mix of quiet progress and profound personal sting. Gigside was growing steadily. The new features I coded that night, fueled by righteous anger and peanut butter, were a hit with my user base. I was starting to generate enough consistent revenue that I could finally quit dog walking. I even hired my first employee, a part-time remote customer service agent in the Philippines named Anna, who was an absolute godsend. For the first time, it felt like a real company, not just a one-woman show. But as my professional world was expanding, my personal world felt like it was shrinking. The distance between me and my family had become a vast, silent ocean. I hadn't seen them since that humiliating Christmas. The thought of it still left a bitter taste in my mouth. I had assumed that my newfound, albeit modest, success might change things. That maybe they would see I was finally standing on my own 2 feet. Then came Thanksgiving. I saw the pictures before anyone said a word to me. Blythe posted a flurry of photos on Instagram, a lavishly decorated table groaning under the weight of food, my parents beaming, Anson and Corbin in matching sweaters, all the nieces and nephews running around. The whole family was there, laughing, celebrating, a perfect portrait of familial bliss. A portrait I was not in. A cold, familiar ache settled in my chest. They hadn't even bothered to invite me. It was one thing to be seated at the kids' table. It was another to be told the house wasn't big enough for you at all. After staring at the photos for an hour, I swallowed my pride and sent a simple text message to my mother. Looks like a beautiful Thanksgiving. Sorry I missed it. It was a test, a small, hopeful probe into the icy silence. Sorry I missed it. It was a test, a small, hopeful probe into the icy silence. Her reply came back almost instantly. The 3 little dots appeared and disappeared for a full minute before the message finally arrived. Oh, Emlyn, we didn't think you could make it anyway. You're always so busy now with your little computer project. We didn't want to bother you. Buzzy. She used the word like an accusation. Your little computer project. The condescension was breathtaking. She made my company, the thing I was pouring my entire life into, sound like a child's hobby. The sting was deeper than I expected. All the success, all the late nights, all the sacrifices. What was the point, if the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally didn't even care enough to send an invitation? A wave of doubt crashed over me. Was I chasing the right thing? I had built a company, but I had lost my family. Darius must have had a sixth sense for my emotional turmoil. He called me that evening, his voice a calm presence in my lonely apartment. "You're quiet," he said. "What's wrong?" I told him everything. About the Instagram photos, the text from my mother, the gnawing feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. I confessed that a part of me had been doing all of this just to prove them wrong, to one day show up in a nice car and a designer jacket of my own and see the looks on their faces. He was silent for a long moment when I finished. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Let me ask you a question, Emlyn," he said finally. "If you achieved all the success in the world, and they still didn't care, would it have been a waste?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I had no answer. "They have shown you who they are. Time and time again." Darius continued, his voice gentle but firm. "They value appearances. They value money that comes easily. They value conformity. That is their choice. They have chosen what they value. Now you must choose what you value. Are you building this company for them, or for you? Are you building it to win their approval, or are you building it because you believe in the problem you are solving and the community you are creating?" His words cut through my self-pity and anger, right to the heart of the matter. Why was I doing this? Was it really just for revenge? I thought back to Maria at the bakery, her ecstatic email about her new online store. I thought about the freelance developer in Romania who was now making a good living entirely through Gigside. I thought about the sense of pride I felt, not when I made money, but when I fixed a difficult bug or launched a feature that users loved. Darius was right. I had let their judgment become the metric for my own success. I had been building my empire with one eye constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for their applause. "You need to stop looking for their validation, Emlyn," Darius said, as if reading my mind. "The only validation that matters is from your customers, from your team, and from yourself when you look in the mirror. Build for them. Build for you." After we hung up, I deleted Instagram from my phone. I didn't need to see their curated lives anymore. I didn't need their approval. The sting of their rejection hadn't vanished, but its power over me had. A quiet shift happened inside me that night. The anger was still a coal in my belly, but it was no longer the fuel. The fuel was now something cleaner, something stronger, purpose. I wasn't just building this to prove them wrong. I was building it to prove that I had been right all along. Right about the idea, right about the need, and most importantly, right about myself. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my determined face in the dark apartment. The work wasn't finished. I was just getting started. The decision to emotionally divest from my family's approval was liberating. It was like taking off a heavy coat I didn't realize I'd been wearing. My focus narrowed to a laser point, Gigside. The company became my entire world, but it no longer felt like a lonely one. I was building a community, and that became my family. With the revenue from the user surge, I started to scale, but I did it in silence. I didn't post about my wins on social media. I didn't tell my family, or what was left of my old friend group, about the milestones we were hitting. I moved out of the leaky studio and into a clean, simple one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't lavish, but it was safe, and the ceiling didn't drip. It felt like a palace. The first major step was building a team. Anna, my customer service agent in the Philippines, was a star. I promoted her to head of support and gave her the budget to hire 2 more people. I found a brilliant self-taught programmer from India, Raj, to help me with the back-end development, freeing me up to focus on strategy and new features. I hired a part-time marketing assistant, a recent college grad from Chicago named Chloe. We were a small, scrappy, completely remote team scattered across 4 countries and multiple time zones. Our office was Slack, our meetings were on Zoom. We were a testament to the very model my company was built on. With a team in place, Gigside began to evolve rapidly. We expanded our platform, adding new categories for freelance writers, graphic designers, and virtual assistants. We launched in 3 new countries, Germany, France, and Japan. After months of research and localization efforts, I poured all the profits back into the company, investing in better security, faster servers, and a more intuitive user interface. My biggest secret project was a partnership with a major state university. Their business school wanted to use Gigside as a real-world case study and platform for their entrepreneurship students. They would license our technology, integrating it directly into their curriculum. It was a massive deal, one that would provide a huge infusion of capital, and more importantly, a stamp of legitimacy that money couldn't buy. The negotiations were complex and took months. I spent weeks poring over contracts with a lawyer Darius recommended, learning about intellectual property and liability clauses. When the deal was finally signed, I didn't celebrate with champagne. I celebrated by buying Raj and his team the best development software on the market, and giving Anna's team a surprise bonus. Their success was my success. While I was building this secret empire, my only contact with my family was a biannual sterile phone call with my mother. She'd ask her perfunctory questions. I'd give my vague answers. She never asked for details about my little project, and I never offered them. In her mind, I was still the struggling daughter, the one who couldn't figure things out. It was a role I was now content to let her believe I was playing. The less they knew, the better. Then, one afternoon, an email arrived that made my heart stop. The subject line was simple: Forbes nomination. I thought it was spam. I almost deleted it. But something made me open it. The email was from a journalist. She was writing for the annual Forbes 30 Under 30 list for technology. Someone, she couldn't say who, but I suspected Darius had nominated me and my company Gigside. She had been following our growth quietly for months. She was impressed by our bootstrapping model, our international reach, and our mission to support small-scale entrepreneurs. She wanted to interview me. I sat there, staring at the email, for a full 10 minutes. Forbes, the magazine my father left on the coffee table as a status symbol. The one my brother Anson always talked about wanting to be featured in. It felt unreal. The journalist, a woman named Chloe, insisted on anonymity until the list was published. We did the interview over several video calls. She was sharp, insightful, and asked all the right questions. She wanted to know everything: the origin story, the struggles, the revenue numbers, the user growth, the vision for the future. I told her the truth, not the whole, messy family truth, but the story of Gigside, the story of sleeping in an alley, of the first yes from Maria's bakery, of building a global team from a tiny apartment. I told her about our revenue, which had crossed into the millions. I told her about our user base, which was now in the hundreds of thousands. As I spoke, I realized how far I had come. The numbers sounded foreign, even to me. Had I really done all this? At the end of our last interview, the journalist asked for a professional headshot. I hired a photographer and had one taken. In the photo, I looked poised, confident, and calm. I looked like the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I looked like a stranger to myself. A week after I sent in the headshot, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. It was a group message to me and all my siblings. "Hi everyone. Just wanted to let you know we're doing our big Christmas dinner again this year on Christmas Day at 5 p.m. We're so excited to have everyone together. Please let me know if you can make it." The invitation was so casual, so breezy, as if the Thanksgiving incident had never happened, as if they hadn't completely ignored my existence for a year. A part of me wanted to just ignore it, but then an idea began to form. A quiet, audacious plan. The Forbes issue was scheduled to be released online and in print in late December. The timing was almost poetic. I texted back a simple, "I'll be there." And as I hit send, I knew. This Christmas, I wouldn't be invisible. This Christmas, they would finally see me. The drive to my parents' house felt different this year. I wasn't in a rattling train car, but in a comfortable, reliable sedan I had bought myself a few months prior. It wasn't flashy, just safe. I wasn't filled with a nervous dread, but a kind of calm, electric anticipation. I had a plan, but the plan's success depended entirely on their actions, not mine. I arrived intentionally late. Not rude late, but late enough that the party would be in full swing. As I walked through the front door, the scene was exactly as I remembered. A perfect replica of every other holiday gathering. The house was warm and smelled of pine needles and roasting turkey. Laughter and cheerful chatter spilled out from the living room. My family was all there, clustered together, glasses in hand. Anson was loudly recounting a courtroom victory. Blythe was showing off a new diamond bracelet from Miles. Corbin was talking about his plans to become a social media influencer, a career path my parents seemed to be funding with bewildering enthusiasm. My arrival caused a small, brief ripple in the conversation. My mother turned, her hostess smile pasted on. "Emlyn, you made it. We were starting to wonder." Her tone was light, but the subtext was clear. "You're an afterthought." She gave me an airy kiss on the cheek that didn't quite land. "You look well," my father said, eyeing my simple black dress and minimal jewelry. It was a far cry from Blythe's sequined number, and his assessment hung in the air, tinged with what sounded like disappointment. I wasn't performing wealth the way they understood it. No one asked me about my life. No one asked about my work. The conversation simply flowed around me, as if I were a rock in a stream. I was a ghost again, a silent observer at my own family's party. My mother bustled past me at one point, patting my arm condescendingly. "It's so good you could get away," she said, her voice laced with pity. "Maybe one day you'll figure life out, dear, and you can enjoy all of this with us." All of this seemed to mean designer clothes and vacuous conversations about resort vacations. I just smiled and nodded, letting her believe I was still the lost, struggling child she needed me to be. I found a spot in the corner, nursing a glass of water, and just watched. The centerpiece of the room, even more than the towering Christmas tree, was the new television, the massive 85-inch screen my father was so proud of. It was on as it always was, playing a rolling news channel on mute. Then my nephew Leo, bless his tech-obsessed little heart, got bored with the adults. He picked up the remote. "Can I watch something else?" he whined. My father, expansive and generous in his holiday mood, waved a hand. "Sure, kiddo, put on whatever you want." Leo started flipping through channels and apps. He landed on a streaming service, and a show called Forbes Profiles was featured on the main screen. The episode title showed a group of diverse, professional-looking young people. The title read, 30 Under 30, The Innovators of Tomorrow. My heart began to beat a little faster. This was it. "Ooh, this looks cool," Leo said, and pressed play. The show's slick, high-energy intro began, with dramatic music and quick cuts of cityscapes and busy offices. The family paid it no mind, Anson was still holding court. Blythe was reapplying her lipstick. The narrator's voice boomed from the high-end soundbar. In a world of billion-dollar valuations and tech unicorns, a new generation of leaders is emerging. They aren't just building companies, they're building the future. The first few segments featured other entrepreneurs. A young man who developed a new kind of biodegradable plastic. A woman who created a breakthrough in AI-driven medical diagnostics. My family continued to ignore it. Then, the narrator's tone shifted. But perhaps no story is as remarkable as that of Emlyn Marlowe. My name, my full name, spoken with authority, filled the room. The chatter didn't stop immediately. It faltered. A few heads turned towards the screen, a flicker of confused recognition in their eyes. Marlowe? I heard Anson say. That's a coincidence. And then, my professional headshot filled the screen. The one I had taken just a few weeks ago. It was me, but a version of me they had never seen. Poised, confident, powerful. The narrator continued. Marlowe is the founder and CEO of Gigside, the bootstrapped tech platform that is revolutionizing the freelance economy. On the screen, the Gigside logo appeared, followed by a montage of our website, testimonials from happy users, and graphics showing our explosive growth. A chyron appeared at the bottom of the screen, simple and brutal. Emlyn Marlowe, founder and CEO, Gigside. Estimated net worth, $7.08 million. Silence. A profound, deafening silence fell over the room. All conversation ceased. All movement stopped. It was as if someone had hit the pause button on my entire family. Blythe's hand, holding her wine glass, froze in midair. Her perfectly painted red lips parted in a silent, disbelieving O. Her eyes, wide with shock, darted from the screen, to me and back to the screen, as if trying to reconcile the two realities. Then, with a faint clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the stillness, the wine glass slipped from her numb fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor, splashing red wine like blood across her silver shoes. Anson, who had been the center of attention just moments before, looked like he had been slapped. The smug, self-satisfied expression was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. He whispered my name, but it was a question, not a statement. That's her. His voice was thin, incredulous. He looked at me as if he'd never seen me before in his life. My parents, their reaction was the most potent. My mother turned pale, a ghastly, chalky white. The cheerful hostess mask crumbled, revealing the raw shock beneath. Her hand flew to her chest, as if to keep her heart from leaping out. My father, who had been standing tall and proud by the fireplace, seemed to shrink. He stared at the screen, at the words $7 million next to my name, and his face, which was usually ruddy with confidence, turned ashen. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The television, indifferent to the domestic implosion it had just caused, continued its story. The narrator detailed Gigside's journey, my journey. They showed graphics of our international expansion, the partnership with the university, the number of users we had empowered. They played a short clip from my interview. My voice, calm and articulate, filled the silent room. I wanted to build a platform that gave power back to the individual, my on-screen self said. To create a space where talent was the only currency that mattered. Every word was a judgment. Every accomplishment listed on that screen was a silent indictment of their years of dismissal. The room was a tableau of frozen faces, a collection of shattered perceptions. And then came the final, most exquisite blow. The narrator was talking about Gigside's rigorous screening process for high-value corporate projects. As he spoke, an image of the corporate portal of our website flashed on the screen, and right there, visible for only a second but clear as day, was a list of recent applications. My brother-in-law, Miles, had been bragging earlier about looking for a new executive challenge, and there it was, on national television for my entire family to see. Miles Covington, application for VP of Strategic Partnerships, status rejected. I saw the flicker of recognition in Blythe's eyes first. Her gaze shot to her husband, who looked like he had been turned to stone. His face, usually a mask of lazy arrogance, was a burning, humiliated red. He had applied to my company. He had begged to join the little computer project run by the family failure. And I had rejected him. Not me personally, of course. Our HR algorithm had likely filtered him out for being unqualified. But in that moment, in that room, it felt like a direct and personal verdict. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer just shock. It was laced with shame, with confusion, with the frantic, panicked rearranging of a worldview that had just been dynamited. They were all looking at me now, really looking at me, for the first time in years. I was no longer the ghost in the corner. I was the sun, and they were just planets caught in my sudden, unexpected gravity. I held their gazes, one by one, and for the first time in my life, I did not look away. The spell finally broke. It was my mother who spoke first, her voice a reedy, unfamiliar thing. "Emlyn, why? Why didn't you tell us?" The question was absurd. It was so completely devoid of self-awareness that I almost laughed. Tell them what? That I was succeeding despite their constant predictions of my failure. That their pity was misplaced. That their judgment was a catalyst. The room was still silent, everyone hanging on my answer, expecting what? An apology? An explanation that would somehow make them feel better? I took a deliberate step out of the corner, moving into the center of the room. I felt calm, the eye of the hurricane I had created. I looked directly at my mother, at her pale, pleading face. "Tell you what, Mom?" I asked, my voice even and quiet, forcing them all to lean in to hear. "Should I have called you after I was locked out of my apartment and spent the night sleeping in an alley? Or maybe I should have sent a text when I was living on peanut butter, because I'd spent my last $20 on server hosting. At what point exactly, in the 5 years of you telling me I was a failure, should I have interrupted to let you know that I was refusing to be one?" My words hung in the air, sharp and precise. I saw Blythe flinch. I saw my father look down at the new stain on his carpet as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. We didn't know," my father stammered, finally finding his voice. "It was weak, defensive. We would have helped you." "Would you have?" I countered, my voice still level. "You bought Corbin a house as an investment. You gave Anson a down payment for his. You funded Blythe and Miles's entire lifestyle. You saw me struggling, and you sat me at the kids' table. You gave everyone in this room a designer jacket except me, because it was too expensive. You didn't offer to help. You offered pity, and you made it very clear that I wasn't a good investment." Miles, who had been bright red, was now a pasty white. He looked at Blythe, who refused to meet his gaze. She was staring at me, a dawning horror on her face. "The application, Miles. You applied to her company," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. He just shook his head, unable to speak. Anson, the lawyer, tried to regain control, to manage the situation. "Okay, Emlyn, we get it. We misjudged things, we're sorry, but this is incredible. You have to tell us how you did it." "A $7 million company? How is that even possible?" He was trying to shift the topic from their failure to my success, to reframe it as a family victory he could now be a part of. They all looked at me then, their shock morphing into a greedy, desperate curiosity. They didn't care about the struggle. They just wanted the secret to the success, the shortcut. They wanted to know how they could get a piece of it. I let the silence stretch, looking at each of their expectant faces. My mother, my father, my siblings, the people who were supposed to be my biggest supporters, had been my heaviest anchors. "You want to know how I did it?" I said, my voice dropping a little lower, pulling them in. "It's simple, really." I paused, making sure I had every last bit of their attention. "You taught me everything I needed to know," I said. "You taught me how to be invisible. You made me so good at being overlooked that I could build an entire empire right under your noses and you never suspected a thing. You never asked. You never cared. So I built in silence. That's my secret. The one you gave me." And with that, I turned my back on their stunned, gaping faces, picked up my purse, and walked toward the door. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their approval. I had finally, truly, proven myself to the only person who mattered, me. I didn't storm out of the house. There was no satisfying slam of the door. I simply left. I walked out into the cold, crisp Christmas night, leaving the warmth and the light and the wreckage of their assumptions behind me. As I drove away, I didn't look back. In my rearview mirror, I could see the brightly lit window of the living room, a perfect square framing a scene of chaos I had orchestrated through nothing more than my own success. I felt a profound, quiet sense of release. It wasn't triumph, not in a fist-pumping, yelling sort of way. It was grace. A quiet, powerful grace that settled over me. The war was over, and I hadn't won by fighting back, but by rising so high the battle itself became irrelevant. In the days that followed, my phone buzzed with their attempts to reach me. Apologetic voicemails from my mother, texts from Blythe, full of exclamation points and sudden effusive praise. An email from Anson with the subject line, Family Business Opportunities. I listened to them, I read them, and I felt nothing. The power they once held over me was gone. I had forgiven them, not for their sake, but for mine. Forgiveness was cutting the last rope that tied my emotions to their actions. But I didn't forget. Forgetting would be a betrayal of the girl who slept in an alley, who ate peanut butter toast, who cried over a designer jacket she never received. My success was no longer a secret, but I decided to control the narrative. I used the Forbes feature not as a weapon, but as a tool. The first thing I did was set up a foundation. Its first official act was to create a scholarship for young women entering the tech field, specifically for those from low-income backgrounds. The first recipient was my youngest cousin, Anson's daughter, who was a bright, quiet girl I always saw being talked over at family gatherings. I didn't do it through him. I sent the award letter directly to her. I wanted her to know that her potential was seen, by me. The story of Gigside, the real story, was about empowerment. So I leaned into it. I found Maria, the owner of the bakery, who was my very first customer. Her business was thriving. I flew her out to speak at our first ever user conference. I found my neighbor from my old leaky apartment building, a talented artist who was struggling to sell his work. I personally onboarded him onto Gigside, helped him build a digital portfolio, and connected him with a boutique hotel chain that was looking for original art. Watching him get his first big commission felt better than seeing my net worth printed in a magazine. My family, realizing their old methods of communication weren't working, tried a new approach. They started trying to mend things. The invitations became more frequent, more desperate. Family brunch, just us. Let's go on a vacation together, my treat. I politely declined most of them. When I did agree to see them, it was on my terms, in a neutral location, for a clearly defined amount of time. The dynamic had irrevocably shifted. They were now the ones seeking my approval. They would ask me questions about my business, their eyes wide, hanging on every word. They were listening, finally. But the sad truth was, they had waited until it was too late. I no longer had anything I needed to say. I walked away from that final Christmas dinner with my head held high, not because I had shamed them, but because I had freed myself. 1 year later, my life is unrecognizable. I live in a modern, minimalist apartment in the city center. The walls are clean, the heater works, and the only dripping sound is the espresso machine in my kitchen. Gigside has expanded into Europe and South America. My small, remote team has grown into a workforce of 50 people, spread across a dozen countries. They are the most brilliant, dedicated people I have ever known. They are my real family, the one I chose, the one I built. Darius still checks in once a month. He never says, "I told you so." He just smiles his quiet, knowing smile and asks, "What's next?" I've come to understand that my family's dismissal, as painful as it was a strange and unintentional gift. Their disbelief forced me to rely on the only person I could, myself. Their low expectations gave me the space to build without scrutiny. Their inability to see me allowed me to become someone they couldn't have imagined. My motivation has changed. It's no longer about proving them wrong. It's about proving to myself, and to anyone else who feels invisible, that your worth is not determined by the people who refuse to see you. Success isn't about the flashy reveal or the moment of revenge. That's just the story you tell later. The real success is in the quiet, unseen moments, the line of code that finally works at 3 a.m., the glowing review from a user whose life you've changed, the ability to look at yourself in the mirror and know that you built the thing you believed in, brick by painful brick. I stand now on a brightly lit stage, looking out at a sea of young, eager faces in a university auditorium. A large screen behind me displays the title of my keynote address. It reads, "How to Build an Empire When No One Believes in You." I take a deep breath, smile, and begin to tell my story. Not the story of what they did to me, but the story of what I did for myself. We rise not by screaming louder, but by building something so powerful, the world has to listen. Have you ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most? What would your silent success look like? Let me know in the comments. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that their silence today could echo loudly tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and remember, being overlooked is sometimes your greatest advantage.